Caitlin Clark is way more important to the WNBA than Tiger Woods was to men's golf, even though he was huge. And to then see this negativity, like why? And what should have been done? I looked seriously at the leadership of the WNBA. And how could you not be prepared for this moment? You've seen it happening in the Big Ten. You've seen it at Iowa. You see these TV ratings.
It's filling in for Mace. I've been looking forward to this all week. Christine Brennan is one of the best sports writers in the country, has been for a long time.
Christine Brennan just exposed the WNBA in a major way. Guys, for this one here, we got to go all the way up to Indy. Let's get it.
The WNBA just got caught with their pants down. A USA Today writer just published shocking findings about how the league's own commissioner and officials have been handling Caitlin Clark. We're talking about jealousy, incompetence, and a complete failure to see excellence when it's staring them in the face. This revelation is really awful for the league's reputation. What do you think? Is the WNBA's treatment of Caitlin Clark simply envy or just sheer incompetence? Please share your opinions in the comments section below.
Came out, what she had to say in this book was going to shake the ground of the WNBA. She's been around for a very long time, and she knows the inner and outer workings of this league. Christine Brennan let it be known in multiple interviews that the WNBA was not ready for a superstar like Caitlin.
So here's what went down.
Christine Brennan, the veteran USA Today reporter who's been covering women's basketball longer than most of these players have been alive, just wrote a book that's virtually a nuclear bomb dropped on the WNBA offices. And let me tell you, the shockwaves are still reverberating around the league.
The thing I don't get, Christine, is that in the case of Tiger and in the case of Jordan, the other players and the league around them, in Tiger's case, the PGA Tour, realized that a rising tide raises all boats and were incredibly supportive of Tiger and Jordan. With Caitlin, it seems like, for whatever reason, she's polarizing. Like she's been hit with more flagrant fouls than any player ever this year. They tried to come at you when you were writing a story and said, don't ask questions about why people don't like Caitlin Clark. But I'm going to ask you, Christine, why is she polarizing in your opinion? Why do people not embrace the phenomenon that is Caitlin Clark?
It's one of the big points in the book. I deal with all of this and my research and reporting, because I was perplexed as well. I mean, this is the greatest moment ever for the WNBA. Yep. We wish it happened sooner. Of course we wish it happened sooner. There were amazing players who, as you know, both you guys know, were toiling in obscurity, the male-dominated mainstream sports media ignoring them.
Brennan didn't simply write a fluff piece about women's empowerment or whatever. She entered full investigative journalism mode and demonstrated precisely how unprepared, how totally stupid, and how downright antagonistic the WNBA was toward their own golden goose. We're talking about Caitlin Clark here, the lady who single-handedly took this league from obscurity into the national spotlight. Apparently, they detested every moment of it.
From home like everybody else. And I think, guys, that actually helped me understand as a journalist the fascination, because I've covered a lot over my career and been very fortunate to be at Wimbledon's and Super Bowls and Tiger Woods and you name it, I've covered it. And I'm so lucky to have done that. And I found myself fascinated, like, who is this? And I'm getting text messages from guys who would never have watched a second of women's basketball. Good guys, they want their daughters to play sports. I mean, good people, but just And they're texting, are you there? I'm watching. Are you seeing this performance? And that told me something that I actually was very helpful to be at home watching it versus being on press row, talking to a bunch of other journalists, that like, okay, there's something going on in the country here. And it's everyone's fascinated and people are standing in line for hours in the cold around the Big Ten, this barnstorming tour. And it's all about a basketball player who happens to be a woman.
The book indicates that the day after Clark filed for the 2024 WNBA draft, Brennan made a phone call to a high league official. Now, this is where things get interesting. This administrator, who clearly lives in some parallel reality, informed Brennan that Clark's entrance was the biggest thing to happen to the league since Maya Moore. Maya Moore. Don't get me wrong. Moore was talented, but let's be serious here. Nobody knew who she was except for ardent basketball enthusiasts. The average population couldn't pick her out of a lineup if their lives depended on it. But here's when Brennan's experience really shows. She knew something these league officials apparently didn't. That Clark was going to be different. Not just different, but revolutionary. Brennan saw the tsunami coming as these so-called basketball experts were comparing her to players who hardly made an impact. She was certain that Clark would attract the interest of not only the typical basketball enthusiasts, but the entire country. And how was this information used by the league? Absolutely nothing. They sat there with their thumbs up their collective rear ends as the biggest chance in women's basketball history was about to settle in their laps. The level of stupidity here is simply amazing when you think about it.
Unauthorized, which is not ominous at all. You want it to be unauthorized because I can tell the truth, unvarnished. Caitlin's quoted throughout the book. She was great answering any question I asked her, but dealing with these important issues. So you've got a 74% black league. We understand this. I mean, I'm white. You know, Ramona, I think you guys are white.
Yeah.
We have no idea what it's like to be black in America. And I say that. Let's be brutally honest here. Here comes a white woman from Iowa, and she's going to be the biggest superstar. Now, absolutely, the spotlight's shining on her. Finally, it's shining on all these other players who deserved it for years but never got it. And that's a wonderful turn of events. But instead of focusing on the positives, sadly, the WNBA players, so many of them, not all.
Now, here's where it gets very juicy. Not only does Brennan's book reveal the league's lack of preparation, but it also reveals their total ignorance of the situation. According to her reporting, league officials honestly didn't believe something like the Caitlin Clark phenomenon could happen to the WNBA. They were so used to being the forgotten stepchild of professional sports that they couldn't even fathom mainstream success was feasible. Take a moment to consider how pitiful that is. Your own league authorities don't believe in your product. They're so persuaded of their own irrelevance that when greatness practically announces itself for your draft, they shrug their shoulders and act like it's business, as usual. It's similar to managing a restaurant and being taken aback when customers genuinely want to consume your food. But it gets worse. The book demonstrates that there were those in the media who saw this coming from miles away. Some content creators and reporters were covering Clark throughout her Iowa days, noting the extraordinary ability and following she had created. They recognized that her fan following wasn't just going to dissipate when she got professional. However, the league executives inexplicably failed to notice any of this. The numbers don't lie here. In 2023, the Indiana Fever averaged roughly 4,000 fans each game. That's not a typo for 1,000. For context, that's smaller than most high school basketball games in Texas. However, supporters were waiting in line outside the arena 2 hours before doors opened when Clark arrived for her first preseason game. 2 hours for a preseason WNBA game. According to reports, the security personnel were astounded since they had never witnessed anything like that.
And an antagonist. And I've argued that the NBA could use a little bit more of hero and villain to popularize the sport again. The WNBA does not need that because for a lot of America, Caitlin Clark is the hero. And anyone that comes to Caitlin Clark's defense is a hero. And everyone that flagrantly fouls her, speaks poorly of her, acts like she's not great is the villain. And then vice versa on that. How big of a part of the story is that when you look at the conflict surrounding Caitlin Clark? We got grown men on talking head shows wanting to fight each other over women's basketball and talking about it, right? We've got all these hot takes about all this going on, Christine. How big of a part of the story is that for you, and is that for this book?
I deal with it for sure in the book. And, I think what we've seen is surprising to me. Having covered women's sports as well as men's, for the length of my career, you would have thought that the arrival of this superstar in the WNBA would have been...
And what was the league's response to this unparalleled interest? Did they lean into it? Did they greet their new star with a red carpet? Did they develop a marketing strategy based on the phenomenon they were dealing with? Of course not. Instead, they seemed almost offended by the attention. They seemed to favor their cozy mediocrity above real achievement. The jealousy component that Brennan shows is possibly the most damaging part of this whole case. Many in the league, including players, officials, and longtime media members, were clearly unhappy with Clark's instant impact as the book makes apparent. This second-year player is garnering more attention than seasoned players with years of experience in the league. The arenas are selling out. The TV ratings are through the roof. All of a sudden, women's basketball is the topic of conversation.
And here comes Caitlin Clark, and let's say it, and I say it in the book. I'd go into this in depth. A white woman from Iowa in a 74% Black league. That's an issue. The book is the first real journalistic look at this entire season and at Caitlin Clark and what she's done and all these issues that are out there. No holds barred. I shy away from nothing. And I look at the way players like Diana Taurasi, Brianna Stewart, Cheryl Swoops with her flurry of falsehoods, Cheryl Reeve, the Olympic coach, Gina Auriemma, really tried to minimize her and were very critical of her. That stunned me. You should be saying, this is great. You don't have to cheer for her. You guard her. You play tough. She's not a victim. She loves to throw it at people. She's feisty and tough out there. And that makes her, I think, even more appealing to so many people. But for this group of people to want to say such negative things and be so wrong about her, okay, fine. It's a free country. You can do what you want. But what she's doing by going into the WNBA.
But instead of enjoying this windfall, instead of realizing that a rising tide lifts all boats, the answer was resentment. On the floor, players were making cheap shots. Officials were making questionable calls. Think pieces about how Clark was receiving too much attention were being written by the media. It's like seeing folks moan about winning the lotto because they didn't pick the numbers themselves. The thing that irritates me the most is how predictable everything was. Anyone with half a brain could see that Clark's collegiate following was going to translate to the professional level. She wasn't simply some flash in the pan who went hot during March Madness. For 4 years in a row, she sold out arenas, broke viewership records, and created real enthusiasm for women's basketball at Iowa. Neon letters were used to write on the wall. However, for some reason, the individuals tasked with expanding and promoting the league failed to notice it. They were unable to see the bigger picture because they were so engrossed in their own tiny world and so certain that things will always be the same. It's professional carelessness on a large scale. Brennan's book also reveals the cultural flaws within the league that made this situation inevitable. Some WNBA players seem to believe that popular success somehow undermines the credibility of the league. For example, if too many people start watching, it loses its authenticity. It's the most retrograde mentality imaginable for a professional sports league. The book demonstrates how this thinking manifested in the treatment of Clark throughout her first season. Instead of preserving their investment, instead of showcasing their new star, the league allowed a culture of hostility to flourish. Players were overtly hostile. Coaches were making rude comments. Additionally, the media was reporting on how Clark was receiving preferential treatment since he brought the league previously unheard of levels of attention and revenue.
Caitlin Clark is way more important to the WNBA than Tiger Woods was to men's golf, even though he was huge to men's golf. And to then see this negativity, the next question would be, or your viewers and listeners are probably say, okay, so like why and what should have been done? And I looked seriously at the leadership of the WNBA. And how could you not be prepared for this moment? You've seen it happening in the Big Ten. You've seen it at Iowa. You see these TV ratings. 4 million more, as I said, watching the women than the men. I think it's worth repeating a few times because It is a stunning statistic, guys.
The way the league handled the marketing opportunities is very shocking. Here you have a player who's generating more attention than the entire league has seen in years, yet they barely knew how to capitalize on it. The merchandise was a complete failure. The scheduling decisions were suspect, and the overall promotional plan seemed to be designed by those who purposefully didn't want the product to succeed. The book makes it apparent that this wasn't just ineptitude. It was deliberate ignorance. League officials were given information, proof, and unmistakable signs that they were dealing with something unique. And they decided to disregard it. They were more at ease in their tiny, closed-off environment than they were with the prospect of real development and achievement. And now here we are in Clark's second season, and the league is still battling to find out how to handle the phenomena they've been blessed with. The TV ratings are still through the roof when she plays. The product continues to fly off the shelves. The arenas are still filled. And yet, there's still this underlying tension. This notion that many within the league want this whole situation to just go away. Brennan's reporting has ripped back the veil on what could be the most spectacular case of organizational dysfunction in modern sports. This league was fighting for both financial viability and relevance, and it was practically dying on the vine. And when salvation arrived in the form of a generational talent with huge mainstream appeal, they regarded it like an inconvenience. This book's consequences extend well beyond women's basketball and the WNBA. It's a case study in how established organizations may be so set in their ways, so resistant to change, that they'll actively work against their own interests. The league had every opportunity to embrace the Clark phenomenon and use it as a launching pad for sustained development and success. Instead, they chose jealousy, hatred, and deliberate ignorance. The most devastating part of Brennan's revelation is how it demonstrates the league's total comprehension of their own situation. They were so sure that they were functioning in some pristine, unspoiled version of basketball that they couldn't recognize a gift when it was delivered to them. They mistook honesty for incompetence and genuineness for irrelevance. What makes this even more annoying is that the cure was so straightforward. All they had to do was embrace their new star, shelter her from the evident jealousy and animosity, and ride the wave of success she was bringing. Rather, they decided to make it as challenging as possible for all parties. The book also shows the significance of social media and new media in identifying Clark's potential before traditional institutions did. While league executives were scratching their heads and mainstream media was playing catch-up, there were content makers and independent journalists who recognized the writing on the wall. They recognized that Clark's appeal went beyond the typical basketball demographics and that her career would be exceptional. This mismatch between old guard thinking and new media reality is another topic that goes throughout Brennan's work. The league was operating with a 1990s mindset in a 2020s reality, and it showed in every facet of how they handled the Clark crisis. From marketing to scheduling to basic public relations, they were continually behind the curve. The book makes it apparent that this wasn't merely a squandered chance. It was active sabotage. The league had all the resources required to capitalize on the Clark phenomenon and create long-term success around it. Instead, they chose to see their biggest asset as a problem to be managed rather than a solution to be embraced. What's more aggravating is how this mindset flowed down to the players and coaches. Many decided to see it as a zero-sum game rather than acknowledging that Clark's success benefited everyone in the league. They assumed that her having attention somehow meant less for them, while in reality the opposite was true. All boats are lifted by a rising tide. But evidently nobody in the WNBA had ever heard that expression. The worldwide consequences of this blunder are also worth addressing. Women's basketball is rising globally, and the WNBA had a chance to position itself as the unchallenged leader of that trend. Clark's appeal wasn't only domestic. She was garnering international attention for the league. However, the league's dysfunction became part of the narrative rather than leveraging that international attention. Let's discuss the particular situations that Brennan's book highlights. The targeting of Clark on the floor wasn't just competitive basketball. The purpose of the systematic harassment was to make her feel inferior. The evident attempts to intimidate her, the trash talk, the blatant fouls. This wasn't happening in a vacuum. This was the basketball court manifestation of the league's culture. And amid all of this, where was the commissioner? Where was the leadership responsible for safeguarding the league's most important asset? According to Brennan's reporting, they were either entirely blind to what was happening or deliberately encouraging it. In any case, the league's leadership structure is severely damaged. The book exposes that there were opportunities at every turn for the league to course correct. When the targeting became apparent, they could have intervened. They might have created a marketing campaign that elevated other players while honoring Clark. They might have negotiated greater sponsorship agreements, TV partnerships, and more by leveraging her notoriety. Instead, they preferred to let the situation fester and deepen. Brennan's exposure of media coverage is very instructive. Instead of applauding the fact that women's basketball was finally getting mainstream coverage, many veteran reporters were outraged by the whole thing. They penned pieces questioning whether Clark deserved the attention, whether she was truly that remarkable, and whether the focus on her was in any way bad for the league. It's like they were intentionally trying to kill the golden goose. Let's also discuss the Nike issue that Brennan mentions. Here's a firm that claimed to be devoted to women's sports, yet they absolutely missed the Clark marketing opportunity. The product was few, the shoe deal was unimpressive, and the entire promotional plan appeared to have been created by someone who had never heard of marketing. It's just another example of established institutions being entirely unprepared for the phenomenon they were dealing with. The book also uncovers the internal politics that were working against Clark from day one. There were sections inside the league who were threatened by her success, and that saw her popularity as somehow undermining their own achievements in women's basketball. These people aggressively attempted to discredit her, to limit her effect, and to make her professional transfer as difficult as possible. The fact that these same individuals are now attempting to claim credit for the league's growing prominence is especially disturbing. They spent Clark's rookie season whining about the attention she was getting, but now they're all over social media, gushing about how amazing it is that women's basketball is finally getting respect. The hypocrisy is astounding. Brennan's book also exposes the financial ramifications of the league's incompetence. The increasing TV ratings, the sold-out venues, and the product sales, all of this translated into actual money that helped every player, every coach, and every employee in the league. But instead of being appreciative of this windfall, many within the organization seemed angry about the source. The generational gap inside the league is also revealed in the book. Older players, coaches, and officials seem particularly hostile to the Clark phenomenon, while younger ones are more willing to embrace it. It's just another illustration of how long-standing organizations may solidify and become unresponsive to change. That's it. The WNBA's utter inability to manage their greatest chance in franchise history. Christine Brennan's book exposes what we suspected about the league's jealousy and incompetence. Please hit the like button and subscribe for more incisive sports analysis if you found this analysis useful. What other WNBA controversies should we cover next? Let me know in the comments below.